The scent of old paper and sea salt had become my refuge. 6 months working at Livraria das Marais, and I still found myself inhaling deeply every morning when I unlocked the heavy wooden door, letting the mingled fragrances wash over me like a baptism. The bookstore smelled of possibility, of stories waiting to be discovered, of quiet corners where wounded souls could hide and heal. I ran my fingers along the spine of a first edition Pessoa, feeling the worn leather beneath my touch. The texture reminded me why I'd fled here, to this small coastal town 3 hours from the city where I'd spent 5 years slowly disappearing. Here, in this converted townhouse with its creaking floors and walls lined floor to ceiling with books, I could finally breathe without measuring each breath against someone else's approval. "Helena, you're early again," Leonore called from the back room, her voice carrying the gentle chiding of someone who worried I worked too hard. She emerged carrying a box of new arrivals, her silver-streaked hair escaping its bun in the humid morning air. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted, which was true enough. The dreams still came sometimes. Bruno's voice explaining why I'd misunderstood, why I was being too sensitive, why I should smile more, speak less, be grateful he tolerated my complicated nature. Leonore set down the box and studied me with the shrewd kindness of a woman who'd seen too much of life to be fooled by surface calm. "The past doesn't let go easily," she said simply. "But every day you're here, you're writing a different story." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. At 28, I sometimes felt ancient, as if those 5 years with Bruno had aged me in ways that couldn't be counted in calendar time. Other days, I felt newborn, learning to walk in a world where my opinions mattered, where silence wasn't safer than speech. The morning passed in the comfortable rhythm I'd grown to love. I helped Carlos Pires, a retired professor who came every Tuesday seeking philosophy texts. I recommended a poetry collection to a young woman whose eyes held the same bruised wariness I recognized from my mirror. I organized the new arrivals, losing myself in the meditative work of categorizing stories, creating order from chaos. It was just past noon when the bell above the door chimed, and a man entered who seemed to carry a different quality of air around him. I looked up from the register where I was processing Carlos's purchase, and found myself meeting dark eyes that held an unexpected patience. He was tall, perhaps 34 or 35, dressed in the kind of casual elegance that spoke of wealth worn lightly. Linen shirt, well-fitted trousers, leather shoes that had molded to his feet through wear rather than newness. His hair was dark with threads of silver at the temples, and his face held the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. "I'm looking for first editions," he said, his voice low and unhurried. "Portuguese poetry specifically. Fernando Pessoa, Flor Bela Espanca, if you have any." Carlos turned at the mention of poetry. His scholarly interest piqued. "Aye, you have excellent taste. Helena here can help you. She has an uncanny ability to match readers with exactly the right book." The man's gaze shifted fully to me, and I felt something unfamiliar stir in my chest. Not fear, which had become my default response to male attention, but curiosity. His look wasn't assessing or possessive. It was simply attentive. "I'd appreciate that," he said, offering a slight smile. "I'm Raphael." "Helena," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "The poetry section is this way." As I led him through the maze of shelves toward the back corner where we kept our rare books, I was acutely aware of him following at a respectful distance. Not too close, not hovering, just present. It had been so long since I'd been around a man whose proximity didn't make my shoulders tense. "You have an impressive collection," Raphael observed, his fingers trailing along spines with the reverence of someone who truly loved books. "How long has this place been here?" "The building is over 100 years old," I said, relaxing into the familiar territory of the store's history. "It was a private library first, then a bookshop. The previous owner, Teresa, ran it for 40 years before retiring. She only agreed to sell because I promised to preserve its character. And have you? He asked, turning to look at me directly. The question felt weighted with more than casual interest. I met his gaze, considering. I'm trying. Some things deserve to be protected, even when, especially when, they've been damaged by time or neglect. Something flickered in his expression, understanding perhaps, or recognition of the layers beneath my words. That requires both strength and gentleness, he said quietly. Not everyone has that combination. I felt heat rise to my cheeks and turned back to the shelves to hide my reaction. What was it about this stranger that made me feel simultaneously seen and safe? With Bruno, I'd learned to hide, to make myself smaller, quieter, more palatable. This man's attention felt different, like sunlight after years of shadow. Here, I said, pulling down a volume with careful hands. First edition Pessoa, 1934. The binding's been restored, but the pages are original. Raphael took the book with the same careful reverence, his fingers brushing mine briefly in the exchange. The contact was incidental, professional, yet I felt it like a spark. When was the last time a man's touch hadn't made me flinch? It's perfect, he said, leafing through the pages with evident appreciation. What else would you recommend? For the next hour, we talked about poetry. Not in the performative way Bruno used to interrogate my reading, testing whether I'd truly understood, correcting my interpretations, explaining the real meaning. Raphael asked questions that had no wrong answers. What spoke to me? Which poems I returned to when life felt heavy? What made me fall in love with words in the first place? I found myself answering honestly, without the self-censorship that had become my second language. I told him about discovering poetry after my mother died when I was 15, how Florbella Espansa's words about longing and loss had given shape to my grief, how reading became my safe space when my father remarried quickly and our home filled with a stranger's rules. Books saved me, I admitted, then immediately wondered why I'd revealed something so personal to someone I'd just met. But Raphael only nodded, his expression thoughtful. They're faithful in a way people often aren't, he said. They don't change their meaning depending on their mood. They don't tell you you're misremembering what you read. The specificity of that last comment caught my attention. I looked at him more carefully, seeing past the surface confidence to something harder underneath. Experience, perhaps, of his own betrayals. No, I agreed softly. They don't gaslight you. His eyes sharpened at my choice of words, and I realized I'd said more than I intended. But instead of prying or offering unwanted sympathy, Raphael simply held my gaze for a moment, acknowledging what I'd revealed without demanding more. I'll take this one, he said, lifting the Pessoa. And I'd like to come back, if that's all right, to see what else you'd recommend. Of course, I said, professional warmth replacing the intimacy that had crept into our conversation. We're open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 6. As I rang up his purchase, wrapping the book carefully in brown paper, Raphael pulled out a business card. I own a hotel chain, he explained. Boutique properties, mostly along the coast. I'm developing a new location about 20 minutes from here, trying to create spaces that feel like sanctuaries rather than just places to sleep. I took the card, reading, Raphael Moniz, Moniz Hospitality Group. The address was in Lisbon, but there was a local phone number as well. If you ever want to discuss creating a small library for the hotel, he continued, I'd value your expertise. The guests I want to attract are the kind who travel with books. It was a professional offer, nothing more. Yet something in the way he presented it felt like an invitation to continue our conversation beyond these walls. Not a demand, not pressure. Just an open door I could choose to walk through or not. I'll think about it, I said, which was more than I'd have said even a month ago. Raphael smiled, and it transformed his face from quietly handsome to genuinely warm. I hope you will. Thank you, Helena. For the book and for the conversation. After he left, I stood holding his business card, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Interested. Not infatuated. Not swept away, just curious about another human being in a way that felt clean and uncomplicated. Leonore appeared from the back, where she'd tactfully given us space. Well, she said, one eyebrow raised. That was unexpected. It was just a customer, I protested weakly. A customer who looked at you like you were rare edition poetry, and he was a careful reader. She patted my shoulder. There's nothing wrong with being seen, Helena. Not when the person looking has gentle eyes. That night, in my small apartment above the bookstore, I sat on my balcony overlooking the ocean and thought about Raphael's question. What made me fall in love with words in the first place? The answer, I realized, was that words had never lied to me. When Bruno said, "I love you," what he meant was, "I love controlling you." When he said, "I'm just trying to help," what he meant was, "I'm trying to make you doubt yourself." When he said, "You're too sensitive," what he meant was, "Your feelings are inconvenient." But when Pessoa wrote about the plurality of being, he meant exactly that. When Espansa wrote about the ache of unfulfilled longing, she meant that ache in all its specificity. Words on a page told the truth. People, or at least the person I'd loved, had not. The ocean whispered against the shore, rhythmic and patient. I'd chosen this town for its distance from my old life, but I'd stayed for this sound, for the reminder that some forces were too vast to be controlled, too ancient to be manipulated. The sea didn't care about my trauma or my healing. It simply continued, indifferent and eternal. My phone buzzed with a text from Joanna, my friend who'd helped me plan my escape from Bruno. "How's the hermit life?" It read, followed by a string of book emojis. "Peaceful," I typed back. "Met an interesting customer today." The 3 dots appeared then. "Interesting how? Details, please." I smiled despite myself. Joanna had been furious on my behalf when I'd finally confessed how small Bruno had made me feel. She'd helped me pack in secret, had lied to Bruno about my whereabouts when he called her demanding answers. She'd been ready to hate any man who looked at me twice. "Just interesting," I wrote. "He likes poetry. Asked good questions." Good questions is code for didn't mansplain. Progress. She wasn't wrong. The bar for male behavior had become so low in my mind that basic respect felt revolutionary. But Raphael had offered something more than absence of harm. He'd offered genuine curiosity. He'd listened more than he'd spoken. He'd let silences breathe instead of filling them with his own importance. Still, I cautioned myself, one pleasant conversation didn't erase 5 years of learning that charm was often manipulation's pretty mask. Bruno had been charming too in the beginning. Attentive. Interested in my thoughts. It was only gradually that his interest had curdled into control, his attention into surveillance. I tucked Raphael's card into my journal, neither throwing it away nor acting on it. Liminal space felt safer than commitment. Even commitment to something as simple as a phone call about hotel libraries. The next few days passed in their gentle rhythm. I opened the store, helped customers, closed up each evening. Carlos came for his Tuesday philosophy, and we discussed Kant over tea in the reading nook. A young couple bought a collection of love poetry, their hands intertwined, their futures bright with untested promises. I tried not to feel cynical about their happiness. Thursday afternoon, the bell chimed again, and Raphael returned. "I finished it," he said, holding up the Pessoa. In one sitting, at 3 a.m, unable to stop. I smiled, recognizing the slightly dazed look of someone emerging from a deep reading experience. That's the Pessoa effect. He gets under your skin. He does, Raphael agreed, so I'm hoping you'll recommend what I should read next. Over the following weeks, This became our pattern. Raphael would come in, we'd talk about what he'd read, and I'd recommend something new. Our conversations expanded beyond books. He told me about his hotels, about trying to build something meaningful in an industry often focused solely on profit. I told him about the store, about my vision for making it more than just a business, a genuine community space. He never asked about my past, never pried into why a 28-year-old woman was running a bookstore in a small town, instead of pursuing whatever life I might have had before. His lack of curiosity about my wounds felt paradoxically like the deepest form of respect. He was interested in who I was now, not who I'd been. Still, I kept our interactions bounded by the bookstore's walls. When he invited me to dinner to discuss the hotel library project, I demurred. When he suggested we continue a conversation over coffee, I smiled and changed the subject. Some part of me remained convinced that stepping beyond this careful friendship would shatter the safety I'd built. It was Leonore who finally called me on it. "You know he's courting you," she said one evening as we closed up. In the old-fashioned sense, slowly, respectfully, but definitely courting. "We're just friends," I protested. "Helena." She fixed me with a look that had probably worked on her own children decades ago. "I've watched customers flirt with you for 6 months. You've mastered the art of polite distance. With Raphael, you lean in. You light up. You're present in a way you never are with anyone else. It doesn't mean you have to do anything," Leonore interrupted gently. "But it does mean you might want to examine why the possibility of happiness terrifies you more than the certainty of loneliness." Her words haunted me that night. Was I terrified of happiness? Or was I simply being realistic about the likelihood of being hurt again? Bruno had taught me that men who seemed good could be very good at seeming. How could I trust my judgment when it had failed me so catastrophically before? The next time Raphael came in, a rainy Tuesday that had kept most customers away, I was shelving books in the poetry section when he found me. "Helena," he said, his voice soft in the quiet store. "I have a question, and I want you to know there's no wrong answer. No pressure." I turned, heart suddenly racing, both hoping for and dreading what he might ask. "Would you have dinner with me?" he said simply. "Not to talk about the hotel project, just to talk, because I enjoy your company, and I'd like to know you better beyond these walls." I stared at Raphael, my hand still resting on the poetry shelf, feeling the weight of his question settle between us like something physical. The rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound that made the rest of the world feel distant. I started, then stopped, unsure how to explain the tangle of want and fear in my chest. Raphael didn't rush to fill the silence. He simply waited, his dark eyes patient, his posture open. Not leaning in, not crowding me, just present. The same quality I'd noticed in him from the beginning, this ability to take up space without demanding it. "I'm not good at this," I finally said, gesturing vaguely between us. "At trusting my judgment about people." "That makes sense," he replied, and something in my chest loosened at his lack of protest or reassurance. He wasn't trying to convince me I was wrong to be cautious. "Can I tell you what I see? And you can decide if I'm right?" I nodded, curious despite my wariness. "I see someone who's been hurt by someone who made her doubt herself," Raphael said quietly. "I see someone who's built something beautiful here, in this bookstore, in this town. A life that feels safe, because she controls it. And I see someone who's interested in me, but terrified that interest will cost her the safety she's worked so hard to create." My throat tightened. He'd seen me, really seen me, in a way that felt both exposing and oddly comforting. "You're not wrong," I whispered. "Then let me offer you this," he said. "Dinner at Marisquera da Costa. It's public, well lit, The owner, Teresa, knows you. If at any point you want to leave, you leave. No questions, no hard feelings. We can go back to being customer and bookseller, and I'll respect that boundary completely. The specificity of his offer, the way he'd thought through my potential fears and addressed them without making me articulate them, did something to the careful walls I'd built. This was a man who understood that safety had to be built brick by brick, not demanded as proof of trust. Friday, I heard myself say, 7 o'clock. Raphael's smile was warm, but not triumphant. Friday at 7. Thank you, Helena. After he left, I sat in the reading nook, rain light filtering through the windows, and wondered what I'd just agreed to. Leonore emerged from the back room where she'd been tactfully absent. You said yes, she observed. I said yes, I confirmed, still surprised at myself. Leonore, what if I'm making a mistake? What if I can't tell the difference between a good man and a good actor? She sat beside me, her weathered hands folding over mine. Then you learn, and you leave, and you survive. Just like you did before. But Helena, staying afraid forever isn't protection. It's just a different kind of prison. That night, I called Joanna. I have a date Friday, I said, as soon as she answered. The shriek on the other end made me pull the phone away from my ear. With Poetry Man? Helena, details, everything. What are you wearing? Where are you going? Have I taught you nothing about first date strategy? Despite my nerves, I laughed. It's just dinner, at Marisquera da Costa. Just dinner, Joanna repeated flatly. Bestie, nothing is just anything when you haven't dated in a year. This is huge. This is you choosing to be open to possibility, instead of hiding behind your books. No offense to your books, I know they're your children. They are easier than humans, I admitted. They're also not going to keep you warm at night or make you laugh or challenge you to grow, Joanna countered. Look, I'm not saying this Raphael guy is the one or whatever. I'm just saying, you deserve to find out if there could be something real there. You deserve to be treated well. And if he's not treating you well, you'll know, because you know what not well looks like now. She was right. That was the strange gift Bruno had given me through his cruelty. A crystal clear understanding of what I wouldn't tolerate again. The gaslighting, the subtle put-downs, the way he'd trained me to question my own perceptions. I'd learned those patterns. I could recognize them. The question was, could I recognize their absence? Could I trust that kindness might be genuine rather than just manipulation's opening move? Friday arrived with surprising speed. I'd told myself all week that it was just dinner, nothing momentous, but my hands still shook as I dressed in a simple blue dress that Joanna had insisted I buy months ago. For when you're ready, she'd said then. Apparently ready had arrived. Marisquera da Costa was a small restaurant on the waterfront, family-owned for 3 generations, known for its fresh seafood and intimate atmosphere. I arrived exactly at 7, neither early nor late, and found Raphael already there, standing outside in the warm evening air. He'd dressed carefully too, button-down shirt, jacket, but nothing too formal. The look of someone who wanted to make an effort without overdoing it. When he saw me, his face lit up in a way that made my stomach flutter. Helena, he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like something precious. You look beautiful. Thank you, I managed, accepting his offered arm as we walked inside. Teresa, the owner, greeted us warmly and led us to a corner table with a view of the ocean. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the water in shades of gold and amber. It was almost aggressively romantic, and I felt a spike of panic. Was this too much? Too fast? But then Raphael said, Is this all right? I asked for a table by the window because I thought you'd appreciate the view. But if it feels too intimate, we can move. The fact that he'd noticed my tension, that he'd given me an out, helped me breathe. "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. The evening unfolded like the best kind of story, the kind where you forget you're reading because you're so immersed in the world being created. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in Lisbon, about his father's small hotel that he'd helped expand into something larger, about his mother, who'd died when he was 20, and how her love of books had been his first inheritance. "She used to read to me every night," he said, his voice softening with memory. "Even when I was far too old for bedtime stories, poetry, novels, plays. She believed stories were how we learned to be human." "She sounds wonderful," I said. And in that moment, I understood something about Raphael. His gentleness with books, his patience with me, came from a woman who'd taught him that tenderness wasn't weakness. "She would have liked you," he said simply. "She always said the best people were the ones who'd been broken and chose kindness anyway." The observation was too accurate, too knowing. "What makes you think I've been broken?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Raphael met my gaze steadily. "Because I have been too, and I recognize the particular way you hold yourself, like you're ready to disappear if the world becomes too sharp around the edges." I set down my wine glass, hands trembling slightly. "I was with someone," I said, the words emerging before I could stop them. "For 5 years. He was. He made me feel like I was always wrong. About everything. My thoughts, my feelings, my memories. By the end, I didn't trust myself at all." "What was his name?" Raphael asked quietly. "Bruno." Even saying it felt like summoning a ghost. Bruno Salazar. Something flickered across Raphael's face. Recognition, maybe, or something darker. "I know that name," he said carefully. "He's a lawyer in Lisbon, isn't he? Corporate litigation?" My stomach dropped. "You know him?" "I've met him," Raphael said, his voice taking on an edge I hadn't heard before. "At business functions. He paused, choosing his words. "He has a reputation for being charming and absolutely ruthless. People either love him or are terrified of him." "I was both," I whispered. "For a long time, I thought love and fear were supposed to exist together. That being scared of disappointing someone meant you really cared about them." Raphael reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine. An offer, not a demand. I looked at his hand, strong and steady, and made a choice. I placed my hand in his. "Love and fear don't belong together," he said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "Fear is what lives in the absence of safety. Real love creates safety, not destroys it." We sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across the table while the ocean whispered beyond the windows. I felt something shift inside me, not healing exactly, but the first recognition that healing might be possible. The rest of dinner passed in easier conversation. Raphael told me about his hotel project, about his vision for creating spaces that felt like sanctuaries. I told him about wanting to expand the bookstore's community programs, about hosting writing workshops and poetry readings. "You should do it," he said with immediate conviction. "The town needs spaces like that, places where people can create, not just consume." "It takes money I don't have," I admitted. "The store does well enough to survive, but extras." "What if I invested?" Raphael asked. "Not as charity, as a genuine business proposition. Your events could draw people to the area, which benefits my hotel. We could cross-promote. Book lovers who come for your workshops could stay at my property. Hotel guests could attend your events." I studied him, looking for the catch, the hidden cost. But his expression held only genuine interest. "I'd want it in writing," I said carefully. Clear terms, proper contracts. I won't be dependent on anyone's goodwill again. Absolutely, he agreed immediately. I'd expect nothing less. Helena, I want to help you build something, not control it. There's a difference. As we left the restaurant, walking slowly along the waterfront, Raphael said, I should tell you something. About Bruno. I tensed. What about him? He's been calling around, Raphael said carefully, asking about you, trying to find out where you went. He called my office 2 weeks ago. My assistant mentioned it because he was insistent, almost aggressive. She didn't tell him anything, but the night air suddenly felt cold. He's looking for me? It seems that way. Raphael's voice was gentle but serious. I don't want to frighten you, but I thought you should know. Has he tried to contact you directly? Not in 6 months, I said, hugging myself against a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. I changed my number, blocked him on everything. I thought he'd moved on. Men like Bruno don't move on, Raphael said quietly. They view people as possessions, and he's apparently decided you were stolen rather than escaped. We reached my building, the converted space above the bookstore that had become my sanctuary. I turned to Raphael, fear and gratitude warring in my chest. Thank you, I said, for telling me, for not making me feel paranoid for being scared. You're not paranoid, he said firmly. You're cautious. There's a difference. He hesitated, then added, Helena, I don't want to overstep, but I have resources. Security resources. If Bruno does find you, if he tries to approach you, I can help keep you safe. The offer was both comforting and terrifying. I don't want to need protection, I said. I don't want to be the woman who needs to be saved. You're not, Raphael said, his voice fierce. You saved yourself. You left him. You built a new life. You're doing the hard work of healing. Accepting help when a genuine threat exists isn't weakness. It's wisdom. I looked up at him, this man who'd appeared in my life like a character from one of my beloved books. Too good, too understanding, too perfectly timed. Part of me still waited for the reveal, for the moment when the mask would slip and I'd see another Bruno underneath. But another part, smaller, braver, wounded but not dead, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was what genuine goodness looked like. Maybe I could trust this. I had a good time tonight, I said softly. I'd like to do it again. Raphael's smile could have lit the dark street. So would I. How about next Friday? Or sooner if you'd like. I'm flexible. Next Friday, I agreed, needing the space to process everything. The date, the revelation about Bruno, the unfamiliar feeling of hope blooming in my chest like something fragile and new. He kissed my cheek, brief, chaste, respectful, and waited until I was safely inside before walking away. I watched from my window as he got into his car, and only then let myself acknowledge the full scope of what I was feeling. Terrified and excited in equal measure, like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. That night, I lay in bed listening to the ocean and thought about Leonore's words. Staying afraid forever isn't protection. It's just a different kind of prison. I'd escaped Bruno's cage. I couldn't let fear build another one. My phone buzzed with a text from Raphael. Thank you for trusting me enough to say yes. Sleep well, Helena. I stared at the message, at the absence of demands or expectations, at the simple expression of gratitude. Then I typed back, thank you for making it easy to say yes. Good night, Raphael. Small steps. That's how you walked back into the world after someone had convinced you that you didn't deserve to occupy space in it. Small steps, taken with someone who was willing to walk at your pace. But even as I drifted toward sleep, I couldn't quite shake the shadow that had fallen over the evening's end. Bruno was looking for me. After 6 months of silence, he was actively trying to find me. The question was, what would he do when he succeeded? The call came on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after my first date with Raphael. I was organizing the new arrivals when my phone rang with an unknown number. Something in my gut twisted. A premonition. Or maybe just the paranoia that Bruno had trained into me. Livraria das Mares, this is Helena, I answered, keeping my voice professionally neutral. Helena. His voice, so familiar it made my skin crawl. I've been looking for you. My hand tightened around the phone. Bruno. After 6 months of silence, his voice in my ear felt like a violation, like he'd somehow breached the sanctuary I'd built. How did you get this number? I managed, proud of how steady my voice remained. Does it matter? His tone was light, almost amused, as if my escape had been a game and he'd finally won. I'm impressed, actually. You hid very well. New town, new number, cash-only apartment rental so I couldn't trace credit cards. Very thorough. The casual way he catalogued my precautions made my blood run cold. He'd been actively hunting me, peeling back the layers of safety I'd constructed. What do you want, Bruno? I asked, moving toward the back room where Leonore couldn't overhear. What I've always wanted. You. Us. Helena. We need to talk about what happened, about why you left. You were confused, overwhelmed. I understand that now, but we can work through it. I forgive you. The audacity of it. His forgiveness, as if I were the one who'd done something wrong, sparked anger through my fear. This was classic Bruno, rewriting history, positioning himself as the victim, offering grace I'd never asked for. There's nothing to work through, I said firmly. I left because you made me feel worthless, because I finally realized that the person I'd become with you, silent, scared, constantly apologizing, wasn't who I wanted to be. See, this is what I'm talking about. His voice took on that patient, explanatory tone I knew so well. You've constructed this narrative where I'm the villain and you're the victim. But Helena, everything I did was because I loved you. I wanted you to be better, stronger. My criticism was meant to help you grow. I closed my eyes, recognizing the manipulation even as part of me, the part he'd trained so well, wanted to believe him. Wanted to think that maybe I had been too sensitive, too quick to take offense. But then I thought of Raphael, of how his attention felt like sunlight instead of surveillance, of how he'd listened to my opinions without correcting them, how he'd noticed my fears without exploiting them. No, I said clearly. Love doesn't diminish. It doesn't convince you that your thoughts are wrong or your feelings are invalid. What you did wasn't love, Bruno. It was control. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I thought he might have hung up. Then, is there someone else? Is that what this is about? This isn't about anyone else, I said, though I felt a flash of fear for Raphael. This is about me choosing myself for the first time in 5 years. Helena. His voice dropped, taking on the dangerous edge I remembered from arguments that had left me shaking. I've invested 5 years in us. I shaped you, helped you become someone worth knowing. You don't get to just throw that away because you had a moment of doubt. The possessiveness in his words, the implication that I was his creation, his project, made something snap inside me. I'm not throwing anything away, I said, my voice stronger than I'd ever managed with him before. I'm reclaiming myself. And I need you to stop looking for me. Stop calling me. Stop trying to pull me back into a relationship that nearly destroyed me. You're being dramatic, he said dismissively. You always did have a flair for the theatrical. Listen, I'm coming to see you. We'll talk in person. Sort this out like adults. I'll be there Friday evening. No. The word came out sharp, final. Don't come here, Bruno. I don't want to see you. It's not a negotiation, Helena. We're going to talk, and you're going to listen. I'll see you Friday. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in the back room, phone clutched in my trembling hand. The walls I'd built, the safety I'd created, suddenly felt paper thin. Bruno had found me. He was coming, and he'd chosen Friday, the night of my second date with Raphael. I called Raphael immediately, my fingers fumbling with the phone. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm. Helena, I was just thinking about you. Bruno called, I said without preamble. He knows where I am. He's coming Friday night. The warmth in his voice evaporated, replaced by sharp focus. Are you safe right now? Are you at the store? Yes, I'm here. Leonor's in the front. But Raphael, he said he's coming to sort things out. He made it sound like I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Raphael said firmly. Helena, listen to me. You don't have to face him alone. You don't have to face him at all if you don't want to. I don't want to, I whispered, but I also don't want to spend my life hiding from him. I can't let fear control me anymore. That's just trading his cage for another one. Raphael was quiet for a moment. Then we face him together, not because you need me to protect you, but because no one should have to confront their abuser alone. Will you let me be there with you? The offer was framed so carefully, not rescue, but support. Not taking over, but standing beside. Yes, I said. I'd like that. Good. Now let's make a plan. Public place, witnesses, clear boundaries. We control the narrative, not him. Over the next few days, we prepared. Raphael suggested we meet Bruno at a cafe on the town square. Neutral ground, populated, with clear exits. He'd be there with me, not as my protector, but as my partner, someone who could bear witness to whatever Bruno said. Joanna called every night, coaching me through possible conversations. Remember, she'd say, you don't owe him explanations. You don't owe him closure. You don't owe him anything except clear boundaries and enforcement of them. Thursday night, Raphael came to my apartment for the first time. We'd been seeing each other regularly for 2 weeks, but always in public spaces, always with clear endpoints. Having him in my personal space felt intimate, vulnerable. I brought dinner, he said, holding up a bag from a local restaurant. Figured you might not feel like cooking. We ate on my small balcony, the ocean providing its constant soundtrack. Raphael didn't push for conversation, seemed content to simply be present while I worked through my anxiety in silence. Finally, I said, "Tell me about when you were broken. You said you'd been hurt too." Raphael set down his fork, his expression growing distant. Her name was Katerina. We were engaged, planning a wedding. I thought we were building a future together. Then I discovered she'd been feeding information about my business to a competitor, using me to undermine my own company. "That's horrible," I breathed. "The worst part wasn't the betrayal," he said slowly. "It was realizing I'd ignored signs because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. She'd drop comments about my boring attention to ethics, about how I could make more money if I were willing to bend rules. I thought she was just more ambitious than me. Turns out she was more corrupt." "How did you move past it?" I asked, slowly. He smiled without humor. "Therapy, time, learning that my judgment wasn't fundamentally broken. I just trusted someone who was very good at lying. And eventually, I let myself be open again. Not naive, not unguarded, but open." "Is that what I am?" I asked softly. "You being open again?" Raphael reached across the small table, taking my hand. "You're what happens when someone who's learned to be careful meets someone worth the risk." "Helena, I can't promise I'll never hurt you. I'm human. I'll make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never deliberately make you feel small or wrong or less than. I can promise that your thoughts matter to me, that your feelings are valid, that you have power in whatever this becomes between us. I felt tears prick my eyes. That's all I want. Equality, partnership, someone who sees me as an actual person instead of a project to perfect, or a possession to control. Then that's what we build, he said simply. Friday arrived with golden sunshine that felt like mockery of my internal weather. I dressed carefully, jeans and a simple blouse, nothing that could be construed as dressing up for Bruno. Raphael picked me up at 6, and we walked to Cafe Atlantico together, our hands linked. Bruno was already there, sitting at an outdoor table, dressed in the expensive suit I remembered him favoring for intimidation. He stood when he saw us approach, his eyes immediately locking on our joined hands with an expression that cycled through surprise, anger, and calculation. "Helena," he said, then shifted his gaze to Raphael. "And you've brought security?" "I've brought my partner," I corrected, proud of how steady my voice was. "Raphael Moniz. Raphael, this is Bruno Salazar." The two men assessed each other with the wariness of wolves establishing territory. Raphael's grip on my hand was firm, grounding, but he didn't speak, leaving me the space to lead this confrontation. We sat, and Bruno's smile was all sharp edges. "Well, this explains a lot. You didn't leave because you needed space to find yourself. You left because you found someone else." "No," I said firmly. "I left because I needed to find myself, period. Raphael has nothing to do with why I left you. I met him months after." Bruno's eyes narrowed. "Months? Helena, you've been gone 6 months. That's not much time between relationships. Makes me wonder what was happening before you left." The implication, that I'd cheated, that I'd been the deceiver, was so predictable, it was almost laughable. "You can wonder whatever you want," I said. "I know the truth. I left you. I spent months healing. I met Raphael when I was ready to be open to someone new. The timeline is none of your business." "Everything about you is my business," Bruno said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register. 5 years, Helena. 5 years I invested in shaping you into someone significant. You were nobody when I met you. A bookstore clerk with no ambition. I made you better. Raphael's hand tightened on mine, but he remained silent, letting me fight my own battle. "You didn't make me better," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "You made me smaller. You convinced me that my thoughts were wrong. My feelings were too much. My very existence was a problem to be managed. That's not love, Bruno. That's abuse." His face flushed with anger. "Abuse? You're calling me abusive? Helena, I gave you everything. A nice apartment, introduced you to important people, tried to help you become someone worth knowing. And you repay me by running away in the middle of the night like I'm some kind of monster?" "You are a monster," I said quietly. "A charming one who knows exactly how to make his victim believe she's the problem. But I'm not your victim anymore." Bruno leaned forward, his voice taking on that coaxing quality I knew was meant to sound reasonable. "Helena, listen to yourself. You're parroting things you've read, therapy speak, feminist rhetoric. This isn't you talking. This is whoever's been filling your head with nonsense. This is me talking," I said, for maybe the first time in 5 years. "And what I'm saying is, leave me alone. Don't call me. Don't look for me. Don't try to fix what you think is broken about my choices. We're done. We have been done since the night I left." "We're not done until I say we're done," Bruno snapped, his mask finally slipping. "You don't get to make that decision unilaterally." "Actually," Raphael said, speaking for the first time, his voice calm and implacable, "she does. That's how consent works, Bruno. in relationships, in conversations, in any interaction between human beings. She's withdrawing hers. You need to respect that. Bruno's gaze swung to Raphael with pure hatred. And who are you to lecture me? Her new puppet master? Trading one controller for another, Helena? How feminist of you. Raphael isn't controlling me, I said. He's supporting me while I do something I should have done years ago. Tell you clearly and publicly that I don't want you in my life. Consider this your formal notification. Don't contact me again. I stood, and Raphael rose with me. We turned to leave, and Bruno's voice followed us, loud enough for other cafe patrons to hear. This isn't over, Helena. You owe me. 5 years of my life, my investment, my plans for our future. You don't get to just walk away from that debt. I turned back, and something in my expression must have shown the anger finally surfacing, because Bruno actually flinched. I owe you nothing, I said clearly. Nothing except this. Thank you for showing me exactly what I'll never accept again. Thank you for hurting me enough that I finally learned what love isn't supposed to feel like. And thank you for letting me go, even if you didn't mean to, so I could discover what it feels like to breathe. We walked away then, leaving Bruno sitting alone at his table, his face mottled with rage and humiliation. My hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. But I'd done it. I'd faced him. I'd told him clearly what I needed. I'd chosen myself. Raphael waited until we were a block away before pulling me into his arms. You were magnificent, he murmured into my hair. So strong. So clear. I'm proud of you. I let myself collapse into his embrace, feeling the tremors rack through me now that the confrontation was over. I can't believe I did that, I whispered. I stood up to him. I didn't apologize or explain or justify. I just told him no. You did, Raphael confirmed, and you meant it. That's the difference between words and boundaries. You set a real boundary and enforced it. That took courage. We stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other while the sunset painted the sky behind us. I'd faced my past. I'd reclaimed my voice. And I'd done it with someone beside me who believed I could, who'd given me space to be strong, instead of rushing in to be strong for me. I'm still scared, I admitted. He looked so angry. What if he doesn't accept this? Then we deal with it, Raphael said firmly. Together. But Helena, you don't have to live in fear of his reactions anymore. His anger is his problem, not yours to manage. That night, in my apartment with Raphael on my balcony, I felt something shift. The fear was still there. I doubted it would disappear overnight. But underneath it, something new. Pride, self-respect, the beginning of belief that maybe, just maybe, I deserved the kind of love that Raphael was offering, the kind that made me bigger instead of smaller. Thank you, I said, my hand finding his in the darkness. For being there, for letting me fight my own battle but not making me fight it alone. Always, Raphael replied, and I heard the promise in his voice. Not a promise to rescue me, but to witness me rescuing myself. To be the steady presence that held space for my healing without trying to rush or control it. It was exactly what I needed. Maybe it was even what love was supposed to look like. Not dramatic rescue or consuming passion, but quiet partnership. Two people choosing each other, over and over, in the small moments that built a life. The text arrived 3 days after the confrontation with Bruno. We need to talk about what happened at the cafe. I was out of line. Can we meet privately? Just to talk, no pressure. I stared at my phone, reading and rereading the message. It looked like an apology, sounded like contrition. Part of me, the part that Bruno had trained so well, wanted to believe in his change of heart, wanted to give him the benefit of doubt he'd never extended to me. but I'd learned to listen to the feeling in my gut now. The one that whispered, "This is a trap." I showed the message to Raphael over lunch at a small bistro near the bookstore. We'd fallen into a rhythm over the past weeks. He'd stop by with food. We'd eat together in the reading nook or on my balcony, talking about books and business and the slow work of building trust. "What do you think?" I asked, watching his face as he read. Raphael's expression darkened. "I think he's trying a different approach. When aggression didn't work, he's pivoting to reconciliation. Classic manipulation tactic, alternating between threats and apparent vulnerability to keep you off balance." "So I shouldn't respond?" "That depends." Raphael set down his phone carefully. "What does your instinct tell you? Not what you think you should do, not what's kind or fair. What does that place inside you, the one that knew something was wrong long before you could name it? What does that part say?" I closed my eyes, tuning into the sensation I'd learned to recognize as my inner compass, the one Bruno had spent 5 years trying to recalibrate. It says this is manipulation, that if I meet him alone, he'll try to convince me I overreacted, that I'm being unfair, that I owe him a chance to explain. And part of me will want to believe him, because I spent so long believing everything he said. "Then don't meet him," Raphael said simply. "Helena, you don't owe him anything. Not your time, not your emotional labor, not the opportunity to confuse you again." I looked at this man across from me, at his patient eyes and gentle hands, and felt a rush of gratitude so intense it ached. "How are you so good at this?" I asked. "At knowing what I need before I know it myself?" Raphael smiled, but it was tinged with old pain. "Because I've had my own trauma work. I know what it feels like to have someone weaponize your kindness against you, to make you doubt your reality. After Katerina, I spent 2 years in therapy, learning to trust my instincts again. I'm just sharing what I learned. The honesty of it, his willingness to admit his own wounds, his own healing journey, made something loosen in my chest. We were both survivors of different betrayals, both learning to build something new from the wreckage. I'm not going to respond, I decided. If he really wanted to apologize, he could do it via text. The insistence on meeting privately is about control, not contrition. "Good," Raphael said, then hesitated. "Helena, I want to tell you something about Bruno." My stomach tightened. "What about him?" "I had someone look into his activities. Not invasively," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "Just public records, professional reputation. He's had 3 complaints filed against him with the Bar Association in the past 2 years. 2 from former colleagues, 1 from a client. All alleging aggressive behavior, manipulation, and what one complaint called systematic psychological harassment. I felt cold despite the warm afternoon. He's done this to others. It seems that way. The complaints were dismissed due to lack of concrete evidence, but the pattern is clear. Helena, I'm telling you this not to frighten you, but so you understand. His behavior toward you wasn't personal. It's who he is. Some people are broken in ways that make them break others. That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about what Raphael had said. For so long, I'd wondered what I'd done wrong, what flaws in me had provoked Bruno's cruelty. But if he treated others the same way, if this was his pattern, rather than my failing, the realization was both liberating and sad. I hadn't caused his abuse. I'd simply been there, vulnerable and kind, and he'd exploited that, just as he'd exploit any opening, any weakness. It was what he did. The next morning, I found a package outside the bookstore door. My name was written in Bruno's distinctive handwriting on the plain brown paper. My hands shook as I carried it inside, feeling like it might detonate. Leonore appeared from the back, took one look at my face and said, "What is it?" "From Bruno," I said, setting it on the counter like it might bite. "Don't open it alone," she advised. Call Raphael." He arrived within 20 minutes, still wearing his business suit from whatever meeting he'd left. Together, we carefully unwrapped the package while Leonore watched from a safe distance. Inside was a leather-bound journal, expensive, beautiful, exactly the kind of thing I would have loved. And on the first page, in Bruno's handwriting, "For all the words you never said to me, maybe if you'd communicated better, we wouldn't be here." The casual cruelty of it, the way he'd turned even his apology attempt into another accusation, made rage flash through me so intensely I nearly threw the journal across the room. "He's still doing it," I said, my voice shaking. Still trying to make it my fault, as if I didn't communicate when really, he never listened. Raphael read the inscription, his jaw tightening. "This is harassment, Helena. Legally actionable harassment. We could file a restraining order." "Would it work?" I asked. "He's a lawyer. He knows how to work the system." "Maybe not," Raphael admitted, "but it creates a paper trail. If he escalates, if he tries something more serious, we'll have documentation of a pattern." Over the next 2 weeks, Bruno's attempts to contact me escalated. More texts, alternating between apologies and accusations. Flowers delivered to the bookstore with notes about our memories. A bottle of my favorite wine, how did he even remember, left on the doorstep of my apartment. Each item felt like a violation, a reminder that he'd once known me intimately and was now weaponizing that knowledge. I started looking over my shoulder constantly, jumping at unexpected sounds, struggling to sleep. Raphael noticed, of course. "You're exhausted," he said one evening, finding me trying to work through anxiety by organizing inventory at midnight. "This isn't sustainable." "I don't know what else to do," I admitted, sinking onto the floor among the boxes of books. I told him no. I set boundaries. I'm doing everything right, and he won't stop. Raphael sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. Then we escalate our response. We file the restraining order. We document everything. We make it legally clear that his behavior is unacceptable. And Helena. He paused, his voice careful. "I want you to consider staying with me for a while. Just until this settles down." I pulled back to look at him. "Move in with you?" "Temporarily," he clarified. "My house has better security than your apartment, and honestly, I'd sleep better knowing you weren't alone while he's being this persistent." The offer was tempting, but terrifying. Living with Raphael, even temporarily, felt like a huge step, one that could either deepen what we were building or complicate it beyond repair. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "Take whatever time you need. The offer stands regardless." That night, I called Joanna. "Raphael asked me to move in with him," I said, temporarily, for safety. "And you're hesitating because?" she prompted. "Because what if it's too fast? What if living together ruins what we have? What if I'm just trading one dependent situation for another?" "Helena," Joanna's voice was firm. "You know the difference between accepting help and being controlled. You've lived both. Raphael is offering you a safe space during a crisis, not demanding you give up your autonomy. That's not the same as what Bruno did." She was right. I knew she was right. But fear had become my default setting, and unlearning that took time. The decision was made for me 3 days later when I arrived at the bookstore to find the window shattered, glass glittering across the floor. Spray painted on the brick wall above were words that made my blood run cold. "You can't hide from what you owe me." The police came, took statements, filed reports. They couldn't prove it was Bruno. No witnesses, no security cameras in this old part of town. But we all knew. "That's it," Raphael said, his voice containing a fury I'd never heard from him before. "You're not staying alone another night. We're getting that restraining order today, and you're coming home with me." I wanted to argue, to insist I could handle this myself. But looking at the destroyed bookstore, my sanctuary, my safe space, violated by Bruno's rage, I realized that stubbornness in the face of genuine danger wasn't strength. It was foolishness. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay." Raphael's house was beautiful, a restored cottage on a cliff overlooking the ocean, all whitewashed walls and large windows that let in floods of natural light. He showed me to the guest room, spacious and comfortable, with its own bathroom and a balcony facing the sea. "You have complete privacy," he said. "This is your space. No expectations or obligations. I'm not here to crowd you, just to make sure you're safe." That first night, lying in bed in a stranger's house, except Raphael didn't feel like a stranger anymore, I listened to the ocean and cried. Cried for the bookstore that had been violated, for the peace I'd built that Bruno kept trying to shatter, for the exhaustion of being hunted by someone who couldn't accept that I wasn't his anymore. But underneath the grief and fear, there was also something else. Gratitude. For Raphael, who'd offered sanctuary without strings. For Leonore, who'd promised the bookstore would be repaired and beautiful again. For Joanna, whose daily texts of support never wavered. For the community I'd built in this town, the people who'd rallied around me when they learned what had happened. I wasn't alone anymore. That was the fundamental difference between my life with Bruno and my life now. Then, he'd systematically isolated me, convinced me no one else would understand or care. Now, I had people, good people, who chose to stand with me. The restraining order was granted the following week. Bruno was to stay 500 meters away from me, the bookstore, and Raphael's property. Any contact, direct or indirect, would result in immediate legal consequences. I waited for the relief that should have accompanied that protection. Instead, I felt only a weary certainty that this wasn't over. Bruno didn't respect legal boundaries any more than he'd respected personal ones. But for now, I had a reprieve. Time to repair the bookstore, to sleep without jumping at every sound, to continue building the life and relationship I wanted, rather than the one I'd escaped. Raphael and I fell into a domestic rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Morning coffee on his deck, evenings cooking dinner together, nights sitting on separate ends of the couch reading while the ocean provided soundtrack. It was intimate without being sexual, comfortable without being complacent. "This is nice," I said one evening, looking up from my book to find Raphael watching me with soft eyes. "It is," he agreed. "Helena, I need you to know. There's no pressure for this to become anything more than it is right now. We're not on a timeline. We're just being." The permission to exist in the moment, without rushing toward some predetermined endpoint, was another gift. With Bruno, everything had been a test, a performance, a step in his grand plan for our future. With Raphael, we were simply two people choosing each other, day by day, with no demands beyond presence and honesty. "I'm falling for you," I admitted, the words surprising me as much as they probably surprised him. Not the desperate, clinging way I loved Bruno. This feels different. Calmer. Safer. Like coming home instead of being swept away. Raphael set down his book and moved to sit beside me, taking my hand. "I'm falling for you too," he said simply. "And you're right. It feels different, because we're building something together rather than one person imposing their vision on the other. That's what partnership looks like." We kissed then, slow and sweet, and it felt like sealing a promise. Not forever, necessarily, but for now. For the foreseeable future. For as long as we kept choosing each other. Later that night, lying in my guest room with the sound of Raphael moving around his own bedroom down the hall, I thought about how far I'd come. 6 months ago, I'd been a woman fleeing in the night, terrified and uncertain. Now I was a woman building a life, facing her fears, opening her heart again despite the risk. Bruno had tried to make me small. Instead, through the strange alchemy of healing and love and community support, I'd discovered I was bigger than I'd ever imagined. Strong enough to face my abuser, brave enough to risk intimacy again, whole enough to know the difference between rescue and partnership. Tomorrow I'd return to the bookstore, now repaired with a new security system installed. I'd continue the work I loved, building the community I cherished. I'd see Raphael in the evening, and we'd continue the slow dance of building trust. And if Bruno tried to interfere again, I'd face that too, because I wasn't alone anymore, and I wasn't afraid. The restraining order held for exactly 3 weeks. Then Bruno found a loophole. He couldn't contact me directly, but apparently nothing prevented him from contacting the bookstore's landlord, my suppliers, even some of my regular customers, all with the same story about how I'd had a breakdown, how I wasn't mentally stable, how people should be concerned about my well-being. "Mrs. Torres just called," Leonore said, her face troubled. "She wanted to know if you were getting help, because someone told her you'd been hospitalized for psychiatric issues. Helena, this is getting out of hand." I sat down hard in the reading nook, feeling the walls close in again. Bruno couldn't attack me directly, so he was attacking my reputation, my livelihood, my place in the community I'd built. It was brilliant and cruel, exactly his style. "We need to fight this," Raphael said when I called him. "Defamation, slander, harassment through third parties. My lawyers can add this to the restraining order violation complaint." But I knew how this would go. Legal proceedings took time, and in the meantime, Bruno would continue poisoning the well. Already I'd noticed some customers treating me with extra gentleness, the kind reserved for the fragile or unwell. I need to address this publicly, I decided. Host an event at the bookstore, invite the community, tell the truth. Not the details, those are mine, but enough that people understand I left an abusive relationship, and my ex is now harassing me. Raphael was quiet for a moment. "That's brave," he said finally, "and risky. It makes you vulnerable." "I'm already vulnerable," I countered. "At least this way, I control the narrative instead of letting Bruno write it for me." The following Saturday, I hosted what I called a community conversation at the bookstore. Nearly 50 people showed up. Customers, neighbors, other business owners. I stood before them, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "Thank you for coming," I began. "I want to address some rumors that have been circulating about me. 6 months ago, I left an abusive relationship. My ex-partner, Bruno Salazar, has been unable to accept that decision. He's been harassing me, in ways that recently have included spreading false information about my mental health to people in this community. I saw recognition and sympathy on many faces, anger on others directed at the situation rather than at me. I'm telling you this not for pity, but for truth. Because I've learned that secrets give abusers power, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. Bruno is attempting to isolate me by damaging my reputation and relationships. I'm asking you not to let him succeed. If anyone contacts you with concerns about my well-being, please refer them to me directly. And please know, I'm not fragile. I'm not broken. I'm a survivor, and I'm rebuilding my life here in this community that I love." The response was overwhelming. People came forward with stories of their own. Partners who wouldn't let go, exes who'd stalked them, relationships that had left scars. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd ever been made to feel small by someone who claimed to love them. Carlos, my Tuesday philosophy customer, stood up. "I have a question," he said, his retired professor's voice carrying authority. "What can we, as a community, do to support you?" I hadn't expected that. Believe me, I said simply. If you hear stories about me, ask me about them. Don't assume the worst. And if anyone sees or hears from Bruno, please let me know immediately. Knowledge is protection. Teresa, the restaurant owner, raised her hand. We're a small town. Word gets around fast. I think we should make it known that Bruno Salazar isn't welcome in our establishments. Business owners can refuse service, and we should. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. I felt tears prick my eyes at this unexpected solidarity, this community choosing to protect one of their own. After the event, as I was cleaning up, Raphael found me in the back room crying over a stack of sympathy cards people had left. Hey, he said softly, pulling me into his arms. Those are happy tears, I hope. I don't know what they are, I admitted. I feel so seen, supported. I expected judgment or pity, but instead, people are rallying around me. It's overwhelming. It's what you deserve, Raphael said firmly. Helena, you've built something real here. These people care about you because you've cared about them. You've created a space of warmth and welcome. Of course, they want to protect that. That night, at Raphael's house where I was still staying, we sat on his deck watching the sunset. I'd been living there for nearly a month, and the temporary arrangement had started to feel permanent in a way that both comforted and scared me. I need to talk about what happens next, I said. With us, I mean. Raphael turned to face me, his expression open and patient. Okay. I can't stay in your guest room forever, I began. At some point, I need to reclaim my independence, my own space. But Raphael, I also don't want to leave. Being here with you has felt right, like home in a way nowhere else has. Then stay, he said simply. Not as my guest, but as my partner. Move your things into my room, our room. Make this house as much yours as mine. No timeline, no pressure, just choosing to build a life together. What if Bruno escalates? I asked. What if staying with you puts you in danger too? Raphael's laugh was sharp. Helena, Bruno isn't dangerous to me. He's a bully who targets people he perceives as weaker. I'm not weak, and I have resources he doesn't. If anything, you staying here makes you safer because he knows he can't isolate or intimidate you when you have a strong support system. I want to say yes, I admitted. But I'm scared of needing you too much, of becoming dependent. There's a difference between dependency and interdependency, Raphael said. Dependency is when one person holds all the power and the other person can't function without them. Interdependency is when two whole people choose to support each other while maintaining their individual autonomy. You have your bookstore, your work, your community. I have my hotels, my projects. We're not merging into one person. We're two people creating a shared life. The distinction mattered. With Bruno, I'd lost myself in trying to be what he wanted. With Raphael, I was discovering more of myself than I'd known existed. Yes, I said. I want to try. I want to make this our home. The kiss that followed felt like signing a contract in the best possible way. A mutual agreement, entered into freely, with clear terms and honest intentions. Over the next few weeks, I moved my belongings from my apartment into Raphael's house. It was strange and wonderful to blend our lives, my books mixing with his, my coffee mugs in his kitchen, my clothes in his closet. We negotiated small things. Who cooked on which nights, how warm to keep the house, where to eat breakfast. The bookstore flourished. The community conversation had created unexpected momentum. People came specifically because they wanted to support me, stayed because they genuinely loved the space. I started hosting monthly events, poetry readings, book clubs, author visits. The programming I dreamed about but couldn't afford to implement became possible with Raphael's investment and the community's enthusiasm. "You've created something special," Leonore said one afternoon, watching as a writing group met in the reading nook. "Teresa would be proud." 3 months after the restraining order, I finally began to relax. Bruno had gone quiet. No contact, no sightings, no third-party harassment. My lawyer suggested he'd likely moved on to easier targets, found some other woman to manipulate. I wanted to believe it. But some part of me remained vigilant, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It happened on a Tuesday evening in June. I was closing the bookstore alone. Leonore had left early for a family commitment. When I heard the door chime, I looked up and froze. Bruno stood in the doorway, his expression strange. Not angry, not threatening, but almost sad. He'd lost weight, I noticed, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made him look older than his 34 years. "You're violating the restraining order," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I reached for my phone. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police." "Please," he said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I ask. 5 minutes, and then I'll leave and never bother you again." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to call Raphael, to get out of there immediately. But something in Bruno's demeanor held me. Not threat, but what looked like genuine desperation. 5 minutes, I agreed against my better judgment. "You stand by the door where I can see the exit, and I'm timing this." Bruno nodded, staying exactly where he was. "Helena, I need you to know. I understand now. What I did to you, how I made you feel. I've been seeing a therapist since the restraining order, working through some things." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe that people could change, that Bruno had genuinely done the work of self-reflection and growth. But I'd learned to listen to my gut, and my gut said, "This is manipulation's newest costume." "I'm glad you're in therapy," I said carefully. "That's important work. But Bruno, it doesn't change anything between us. We're done. We've been done. Your growth journey, if it's genuine, is for you, not for us." "I know that," he said quickly. "I'm not here to ask you to come back. I'm here to apologize. Really apologize. Not the conditional kind where I blame you or make excuses. Just, I'm sorry. For everything I did. For how I treated you. For not seeing you as a full person with your own thoughts and feelings. I'm sorry." The apology sounded genuine. His body language seemed open, vulnerable. And yet, "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I accept your apology. Now please leave." Bruno's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of rage that disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. "That's it? After everything, after I've done all this work, you're just dismissing me?" There it was, the expectation that his apology entitled him to my forgiveness, my time, my emotional labor, that doing the bare minimum of acknowledging his wrongs meant I owed him something. "Yes," I said firmly. "That's it. Your work is for you, not for me. I don't owe you forgiveness or reconciliation or continued relationship just because you've allegedly improved. Now leave, Bruno. Your 5 minutes are up." His face hardened. "You've changed," he said, and it wasn't a compliment. "You used to be kind, compassionate. Now you're cold, hard. What did he do to you?" "He helped me find the strength I always had," I replied. "He didn't change me, Bruno. You did. You showed me what I won't tolerate, and Raphael showed me what I deserve. Now for the last time, leave." "Or what?" Bruno challenged, taking a step closer. "You'll call your boyfriend? The police? Helena, I came here to apologize, and you're treating me like a criminal." "You are a criminal," I said, backing toward the register where I'd left my phone. "You're violating a restraining order." You have 10 seconds to leave before I press dial. For a moment, I thought he might rush me. His body tensed, his hands clenched into fists, and I saw the full fury he'd always kept carefully masked beneath charm and concern. Then the door chimed again, and Carlos walked in. My Tuesday regular, there for the philosophy discussion we'd scheduled, and I'd completely forgotten. "Helena, I'm not late, am I?" he asked, then took in the scene, Bruno's aggressive posture, my defensive stance, the tension crackling in the air. "Is everything all right?" The spell broke. Bruno smoothed his expression, offered a false smile, and said, "We're fine. Just finishing up a conversation." "Helena, think about what I said. You'll regret this stubbornness." He walked out, and I sank against the counter, legs shaking. Carlos locked the door behind Bruno and turned to me. "Should I call someone? Raphael? The police?" "Both," I said. "Please." What followed was a blur. Police report, Raphael arriving with his lawyers, security footage reviewed. Bruno had been in the store for exactly 7 minutes, 2 minutes longer than the 5 he'd promised. He'd violated the restraining order, and now there would be consequences. That night, safe in Raphael's arms in our bedroom, I finally let myself fall apart. I thought I was getting better. I sobbed. I thought I was strong enough that he couldn't shake me. But seeing him, hearing his voice, I felt like that scared woman again. "You are strong," Raphael murmured, his hand stroking my hair. "You stood your ground. You didn't let him manipulate you. You called for help when you needed it. Helena, strength isn't never being afraid. It's being afraid and doing what you need to anyway." "He's never going to stop," I whispered. "No matter how many restraining orders, no matter what the courts say, he's going to keep coming." Raphael pulled back to look at me, his expression serious. "Then we escalate. We make it clear, legally, publicly, definitively, that his behavior has consequences. And Helena, I need you to consider something." "What?" "Leaving town for a while, just until the legal system catches up with him. I have a property in the Azores, beautiful and isolated. We could both work remotely for a few months. Let the lawyers handle Bruno. Come back when it's truly safe." The offer was tempting, but it was also, in a way, letting Bruno win, letting him drive me from the home and community I'd built. "I don't want to run again," I said. "I ran once and he found me. If I keep running, I'll spend my whole life in hiding. I want to stand my ground. I want him to be the one who has to leave." Raphael nodded slowly. "Okay, then we fight. Whatever you need, whatever it takes, we fight." Over the following weeks, we did exactly that. Bruno was charged with violating the restraining order and spent a night in jail before posting bail. My lawyer filed additional complaints, including stalking and harassment charges. The Bar Association received detailed documentation of his behavior, including testimony from his other victims, who'd found courage in my public stand. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Bruno was suspended from practicing law pending investigation. His reputation in the legal community took serious hits. The pressure of actual consequences began to break through his conviction that he was untouchable. One evening, as Raphael and I prepared dinner together in our kitchen, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I'd learned to be wary of unknown calls, but something made me answer. "Ms. Carvalho?" An unfamiliar woman's voice. "This is Detective Pires with the Judicial Police. I'm calling to inform you that Bruno Salazar has agreed to a plea deal regarding the charges against him. In exchange for suspended sentence and probation, he's agreed to mandatory psychiatric treatment and a 5-year no-contact order. He's also agreed to leave the region entirely. He'll be relocating to Porto." I sank into a chair, barely believing what I was hearing. He's leaving? For real? His lawyer made it clear that fighting the charges would likely result in jail time and permanent loss of his license, Detective Pires explained. This was his best option for salvaging any future career. Ms. Carvalho, I want you to know what you did, speaking publicly about the abuse, documenting everything, standing firm. It mattered. You created a record that made prosecution possible. After I hung up, Raphael found me crying at the kitchen table. What happened? He asked, immediately concerned. He's leaving, I said through tears. Bruno's moving to Porto. 5-year no-contact order. It's over. It's actually over. Raphael pulled me into his arms, and I felt the tension I'd been carrying for months finally release. Bruno was gone. I was safe. We were safe. You did it. Raphael murmured. You survived. You fought back. You won. Helena, I'm so proud of you. That night, lying in bed with the ocean singing its endless song beyond our windows, I thought about the journey from the woman who'd fled in the night to the woman who'd stood her ground, about the community that had rallied around me, the man who'd shown me what love could look like, the strength I'd discovered in myself. I wasn't the same woman Bruno had tried to destroy. I was someone new, someone forged in the fire of survival, tempered by love and support, strong enough to face whatever came next. And what came next was mine to choose. Not my abusers, not my pasts, but mine. 6 months after Bruno left for Porto, life settled into a rhythm that felt like the first deep breath after years of shallow ones. The bookstore thrived, my relationship with Raphael deepened, and I slowly learned to exist without the constant vigilance that had become second nature. You're different, Joanna observed during one of her visits, watching me laugh unselfconsciously at something Raphael had said. Lighter somehow, like you've finally stopped waiting for disaster. She was right. The hypervigilance had faded, replaced by something I'd almost forgotten. Peace. The simple pleasure of living without fear, of making plans for a future I actually believed I'd have. Raphael and I had been talking about expanding the bookstore model, creating similar community spaces in other coastal towns, places where books and conversation could weave together. It was a shared dream, the kind that emerged from long conversations on our deck, from seeing what we'd built together and imagining its potential. I have something I want to show you, Raphael said one Saturday morning, his eyes bright with barely contained excitement. A surprise. I'd learned to trust his surprises. They were never manipulative or controlling, just thoughtful gestures that showed how well he'd come to know me. Show me, I said, intrigued. He drove us along the coast to a neighboring town, about 30 minutes north. As we pulled up to a large, beautiful building overlooking the ocean, my breath caught. It was clearly an old hotel, probably from the early 20th century, with that classic Portuguese architecture I loved. Azulejo tiles, wrought iron balconies, large windows designed to capture the sea views. It's been abandoned for 15 years, Raphael explained as we got out of the car. The owner finally agreed to sell. Helena, I bought it for us. For our dream. I turned to stare at him. You bought a hotel? Not just a hotel, he said, taking my hand and leading me to the entrance. A literary inn. Ground floor is a bookstore, bigger than your current one, with space for events, readings, workshops. The upper floors are guest rooms, each one themed after a different author. Pessoa, Saramago, Espansa. People can come for weekend retreats, immerse themselves in literature and ocean air. As he unlocked the door and we stepped inside, I could see it. The potential beneath the dust and disrepair. The grand reading room that could host events. The nooks perfect for quiet reading. The balconies where guests could sit with coffee and books. It would be ours, Raphael continued. Equal partners in both ownership and operation. You'd have complete creative control over the literary side. I'd handle the hospitality logistics. Helena, this could be something really special. I turned to him, overwhelmed by the vision he was offering. This is enormous. The investment, the work, the risk. "I believe in you," he said simply. "I believe in us, and I believe in what we can create together." "But Helena, I need you to know, I'm not proposing this to tie you to me or make you dependent. If you say yes, we'll have ironclad legal agreements about your ownership stake, your autonomy, your ability to walk away if it doesn't work. I'm not Bruno. I don't trap people." The explicit acknowledgement of my fears, the practical steps he'd already thought through to protect my independence. This was exactly why I'd fallen in love with this man. He understood that trust was built through actions, not promises. "Show me the rest," I said, smiling through tears. We spent hours exploring the building, Raphael pointing out possibilities while I cataloged the spaces in my mind. This room for poetry readings, that corner for a children's section, these balconies for intimate book discussions with the ocean as backdrop. "There's one more thing," Raphael said as we stood on the top floor, looking out at the endless blue of sea-meeting sky. "I wanted to show you this first, to make sure you loved it. Because if you do, if you say yes to the inn." He turned to face me, and I saw nervousness in his expression for the first time since I'd known him. "If you say yes to the inn, I want to ask if you'll say yes to something else too." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my heart began to race. "Helena Carvalho," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small emerald. My birthstone, I realized, not a diamond. "I'm not asking you to complete me or save me or fix something broken. I'm asking if you want to build a life with someone who sees you, values you, challenges you to grow while supporting exactly who you are. Will you marry me?" I looked at the ring, at his face, at the building around us that represented our shared future. And I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The woman who'd fled an abusive relationship, who'd rebuilt herself book by book, who'd learned to trust again despite every reason not to. "Yes," I said, the word feeling like freedom rather than confinement. "Yes to the inn, yes to the partnership, yes to marriage, yes to all of it." The kiss that followed tasted of salt air and happy tears, and the promise of a future we'd write together. Over the next several months, we threw ourselves into the renovation. I worked mornings at the original bookstore, which Leonor agreed to manage day to day, then spent afternoons at the inn project. Raphael juggled his existing properties while overseeing construction, and somehow we made it work. "You're happy," Leonor observed one Tuesday, watching me organize book orders with a lightness that had been absent for so long. "Genuinely, deeply happy. It's good to see." "I am," I admitted. "It's strange, you know. I spent so long just trying to survive, to be okay. I forgot what it felt like to actually thrive." The community rallied around the project too. Carlos volunteered to lead philosophy discussions at the inn. Teresa offered to cater the opening event. Local artists donated paintings for the guest rooms. What we were building wasn't just a business. It was a community hub, a gathering place for everyone who believed that stories mattered. 3 weeks before the inn's grand opening, I received an unexpected letter. The return address was Porto, and my stomach clenched when I recognized the handwriting. I debated not opening it, but curiosity won out. Inside was a single page, Bruno's familiar scrawl covering it. "Helena, I know I have no right to contact you, even via letter, but I'm in treatment now. Real treatment, not the manipulative show I put on before. My therapist suggested I write this, not to send it, but to process my actions. I'm sending it anyway, because you deserve to know. I understand now what I did to you. I systematically destroyed your confidence, isolated you from support, made you doubt your own reality. I did this consciously, methodically, because making you small made me feel powerful. This wasn't love. This was abuse. You were right to leave. You were right to fight back. You were right about everything. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for contact. I just wanted you to know. I see it now, and I'm sorry. I hope you found the happiness I tried to steal from you. You deserve it. Bruno. I read it 3 times, looking for hidden barbs or manipulation, but it seemed genuine. Not that it changed anything. Sorry didn't undo trauma, didn't erase years of systematic emotional abuse. But perhaps it offered something. Closure. The knowledge that even Bruno, in whatever limited capacity he was capable of, had finally acknowledged the truth. I showed the letter to Raphael. "What do you think?" I asked. He read it carefully, his expression thoughtful. "I think people can change, sometimes, with real work and consequences. I think Bruno possibly has started to reckon with what he did. But Helena, the important question isn't whether his apology is genuine, it's whether you need it to be. Does this change anything for you?" I considered that. "No," I said finally. "I've already healed from what he did. I've already built a new life. His acknowledgement is for him, not for me. I don't need it, even if it's real." "Then that's your answer," Raphael said, pulling me close. "You've moved beyond him. He's not your story anymore. He's just a chapter you survived. What comes next? That's what matters." The inn's grand opening fell on a perfect October evening, the kind where the last warmth of summer meets the first crispness of autumn. We'd decided to call it Casa das Letras, House of Letters, and the name was painted in elegant script above the entrance. Nearly 200 people came. Friends, customers, community members, even some of Raphael's business associates who'd heard about the project and wanted to support it. The bookstore space glowed with warm lighting, its shelves already filled with carefully curated selections. Upstairs, the guest rooms stood ready, each one a tribute to a Portuguese literary giant. I stood at the entrance, watching people flow in with wonder and excitement, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This place, this beautiful space dedicated to stories and community, existed because I'd survived, because I'd chosen to rebuild rather than remain broken. "Speech time," Raphael murmured, appearing at my elbow with a glass of wine. "Ready?" I nodded, taking his hand as we moved to the center of the room. The crowd quieted, faces turning toward us with warmth and anticipation. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Casa das Letras exists because of this community. Your support, your belief, your love of stories. But more personally, it exists because almost 2 years ago, I made a choice to leave a situation that was destroying me. I fled to this coastline believing I needed to hide, to disappear, to make myself small enough that I wouldn't be found. I felt Raphael's hand squeeze mine, encouraging. But this community taught me something different. You taught me that safety isn't found in hiding. It's built through connection, through standing firm, through allowing ourselves to be seen and supported. This building represents that lesson. It's a place where people can come to be themselves, to read and talk and create without fear of judgment. A sanctuary not through isolation, but through community. I paused, looking around at the faces of people who'd stood by me through everything. I also want to thank my partner in every sense, Raphael Moniz, who showed me what love looks like when it's not twisted with control, who believed in me when I barely believed in myself, who helped me build not just this place, but a life worth living. Raphael smiled, his eyes bright, and I continued. So tonight, we're not just opening a literary inn, we're opening a space dedicated to the idea that our stories don't end with our traumas, that we can write new chapters, better ones, chapters filled with connection and creation and joy. Welcome to Casa das Letras. Welcome to the next chapter. The applause was thunderous, accompanied by cheers and the clinking of glasses. People surged forward to congratulate us, to tour the space, to claim spots for upcoming workshops and events. Later that evening, after the last guest had departed and we stood alone in our creation, Raphael pulled me onto the empty dance floor we'd cleared in the reading room. "Dance with me," he said, pulling out his phone and starting music. Soft, instrumental, the kind that wrapped around you like a warm blanket. We swayed together, the ocean visible through the windows, the shelves of books surrounding us like silent witnesses. "I love you," I said, the words coming easily now after months of practice. "I love what we've built, who I've become with you, the future we're creating." "I love you too," Raphael replied. "And Helena, I'm proud of you, of the woman who had the courage to leave, the strength to rebuild, the wisdom to let love in again. You're extraordinary." As we danced in our bookstore, in our inn, in the life we'd deliberately crafted together, I thought about the question Raphael had asked me months ago. What made me fall in love with words in the first place? I had a new answer now. Words had power. The power to wound or heal, to diminish or elevate, to trap or liberate. Bruno had used words as weapons, twisting language until I couldn't trust my own thoughts. But words had also saved me. The poetry that gave shape to my pain, the friends who'd spoken truth when I needed it, the community that had said, "We believe you," and meant it. And now, words would be my gift to others. Through Casa das Letras, I'd create space for stories to be shared, for voices to be heard, for people to discover that their words mattered, that they mattered. 3 months after the opening, on a crisp January morning with the ocean wild and silver beyond our windows, Raphael and I got married. Not a big ceremony, just close friends and family in the inn's reading room, surrounded by books and love and the community that had saved me. I wore a simple cream dress, and Raphael wore a navy suit, and when we exchanged vows, they were words we'd written ourselves, promises of partnership, respect, and continued growth. "I promise to see you clearly," I said, my voice carrying through the quiet room. "To value your thoughts, honor your feelings, and never make you small to elevate myself. I promise to build with you, not over you. To choose you every day, as many days as we have." "I promise to create safety," Raphael replied, his eyes locked on mine. "Not through control, but through consistency. To be worthy of your trust, to hold your heart with the care it deserves, to stand beside you, not above you, to love you as you are, not as I wish you were." When we kissed as husband and wife, I felt something click into place. Not completion, because I'd learned I was already whole, but alignment. Two complete people choosing to walk the same path, side by side. That night, in the apartment we'd created on the inn's top floor, our private sanctuary above the public space, Raphael gave me a wedding gift. It was a leather journal, beautiful and expensive, but not the one Bruno had sent with his cruel inscription. "For the words you want to say," Raphael had written on the first page. "For the stories only you can tell. For the voice that deserves to be heard." I ran my fingers over the empty pages, feeling their potential, and I began to write. Not my trauma, though that was part of my story, but everything that came after. The rebuilding, the community, the love, the triumph of surviving and then thriving. I wrote about fear transformed into courage, about isolation replaced by connection, about a woman who'd learned that she was enough, not despite her wounds, but because of how she'd chosen to heal them. And as I wrote in my new journal, in my new home, next to my new husband, with the ocean singing its ancient song beyond our windows, I realized this was the happy ending. Not because everything was perfect, not because all the pain had disappeared, but because I'd chosen myself. Over and over, in 1,000 small decisions. I'd chosen my own worth, my own voice, my own story. And that choice, that continuous, deliberate choice, was the most powerful thing I'd ever done.